What if I told you there is a billionaire escape plan happening right now, and almost no one is talking about it? Billionaires are quietly buying gold and land while the system tells you everything is fine. This isn't fear. It's an elite financial strategy built on experience, not hope. A silent wealth transfer is happening before a possible global financial collapse. Question is not if the system breaks, but who is prepared when it does. Gold as a safe haven and real land are not trends. They are protection. The video exposes warning signs of economic collapse the public rarely sees. They'll understand why billionaires don't trust the banking system anymore. What the elite knows about the future of the global economy.
Have you ever stopped to ask yourself why the very people who built the modern financial world are now trying to escape it? While the average person is being pushed toward digital tokens, volatile tech stocks, and the next revolutionary investment in the cloud, something very different is happening in silence. Behind closed doors, the global elite are quietly getting out. Billionaires, hedge fund titans, and the architects of the system are moving their chips off the table. Not loudly, not publicly, but decisively. Here's the first red flag. While you're told to trust digital assets and endless growth, people like Bill Gates are buying hundreds of thousands of acres of farmland. At the same time, central banks, the same institutions that print money out of thin air, are hoarding physical gold at levels not seen in decades. This isn't diversification. This is retreat. A massive, coordinated migration of wealth into assets that can't be hacked, frozen, or inflated away. And that contradiction should make you uncomfortable. Because the truth is, the super rich aren't chasing higher returns anymore. They're executing a survival plan. They know something about the financial system that most people don't, or maybe something you've already felt but couldn't fully explain. That quiet suspicion that the game feels rigged, that even while markets hit record highs, real life feels heavier, more fragile, more unstable. If you've ever felt like the rules were designed for someone else to win, stay with me until the end. In a few minutes, I'll show you the exact signal they're following. We're living in a moment where the system still looks strong on the surface, but underneath, the structure is decaying. For decades, the global financial machine hasn't been run as a public service, but as a highly refined business model built on debt, inflation, and extraction. Wealth doesn't rise anymore. It's pulled upward, slowly and systematically, from the many to the few. And here's the part most people miss. Even the most sophisticated operation has an expiration date. The people at the top know this. They know the currencies we use, the banks we trust, and the contracts we sign are all part of a fragile digital structure, one strong shock away from failure. That's why what you're seeing right now isn't random. It's the billionaire's escape plan. Ask yourself this. Why would someone whose entire empire is built on software, algorithms, and screens suddenly care about dirt, water, and metal? Why would institutions that control the money supply rush to own something they can't print? Because when the music stops, price disappears, and only real value remains. What you can touch, what you can defend, what can sustain life. This is the turning point. A silent shift from the illusion of paper to the reality of the earth. A move that signals a deep lack of confidence in the very institutions these people represent. But to understand why the fear at the top is growing, we need to go deeper. We need to look into how wealth is really manufactured in the 21st century, behind the corporate veil and beyond the headlines. What comes next isn't just about money. It's about power, control, and who's prepared when the system resets. The veil is about to lift, and once you see the pattern, you won't be able to unsee it. This isn't about one or two corrupt bankers, and it's definitely not about a single bank collapsing. What's happening is structural. An entire system where the line between high finance and organized crime has become so thin, it's almost invisible. In the traditional underworld, control comes through violence. Here, control comes through debt, incomprehensible derivatives, and markets that operate in the dark. The outcome is always the same. Risk is pushed onto the public, while profit is concentrated in the hands of a few. And the moment you realize the system isn't broken, It's working exactly as it was designed. Your understanding of money changes forever. This is the point where everything starts to make sense. Inflation that never matches the official numbers. The cost of living rising faster than any paycheck. That constant feeling of working harder, earning less, and still falling behind. This isn't bad luck. It isn't incompetence. It's the direct consequence of a model built to silently extract value from those who don't understand the rules of the game. And the ultra-wealthy understand those rules better than anyone, because they helped write them. That's why they're not just investing. They're quietly exiting the crime scene they helped create. Now pay close attention to this. If you're also noticing these cracks in the system, if this connects with something you've felt in real life, write it in the comments right now. You don't need to explain much. Just mark your presence. The algorithm needs to know you're not alone in this reading of reality, that this isn't paranoia, it's a pattern. Because once you understand the business model of the global elite, it becomes impossible to ignore what comes next. The rush into gold and land isn't normal financial hedging. It's a full vote of no confidence in a paper-based world. They're betting that very soon, numbers on a screen may no longer buy food, energy, or security. In practice, they're betting against the very civilization they built. And that's exactly why what comes next matters even more. In the next step of this investigation, you'll see the specific mechanisms they use to shield their wealth, while the rest of the world absorbs the losses. The real crime of the century doesn't happen in dark alleys. It happens in plain sight, inside luxury boardrooms, with contracts that are perfectly legal. And the trail they're leaving behind tells a survival story that almost no one is prepared for. To understand why the world's wealthiest individuals are sprinting toward hard assets, we first have to dismantle the greatest illusion of the modern financial system. We're taught that Wall Street is the engine of progress, a place where capital fuels innovation and builds prosperity. But once you step behind the curtain and study how money actually moves, a far darker reality appears. The core business model of the largest financial institutions has quietly changed. It's no longer about funding growth or supporting production. It has become an architecture of chaos, where profit is no longer created, it is extracted, systematically, legally, and relentlessly. Think about how organized crime really works. A cartel doesn't build value. It creates dependency, then charges a fee for survival inside its territory. Now translate that logic into modern finance. When global banks are caught manipulating interest rates that affect trillions of dollars in mortgages, loans, and credit cards, what you're witnessing is a digital protection racket. When those same institutions are exposed for laundering money for criminal networks and walk away with fines that barely dent their profits, that isn't justice. That's overhead, a licensing cost. This is the truth buried under spreadsheets and technical language. White-collar crime isn't a flaw in the system. It is the system. And this is the moment most people stop listening. But this is where it gets dangerous. Because the consequences of this model don't stay on trading floors. They bleed directly into your daily life. When finance prioritizes extraction over creation, money itself begins to rot. Paper currency, dollars, euros, yen, slowly disconnects from reality. In a system powered by debt expansion and structural fraud, your savings are quietly taxed through inflation and loss of purchasing power. The super rich understand this better than anyone because they're in the rooms where these decisions are made. They know a system built on exploitation eventually runs out of people to exploit. And that's why they're leaving before the illusion collapses completely. This isn't theory, it's historical pattern. Every failing empire follows the same sequence: currency debasement, institutional corruption, and finally, a desperate flight to tangible assets. What we're witnessing now is a global shift where the paper illusion is being exposed in real time. Billionaires aren't buying land and gold because it's trendy. They're doing it because in a world of digital manipulation, physical reality is the last form of sovereignty. The mindset has shifted from growth at all costs to preservation at all costs. This journey isn't just about understanding finance. It's about seeing the world as it actually operates, not how it's marketed. The disconnect between soaring stock markets and everyday life isn't a mystery. It's evidence. evidence that the illusion is being maintained just long enough to provide exit liquidity for those at the top. Behind closed doors, they're trading the volatile, the hackable, and the inflatable for what is permanent, fertile, and finite. Every move they make is a signal, if you're willing to read it. And this transformation is happening right now. The data makes the strategy impossible to ignore. They're abandoning the very architecture of corruption they designed, leaving the consequences for everyone else. It's cold, it's calculated, and it prioritizes the survival of the few over the stability of the many. But understanding this changes something important, because once you see the system clearly, you realize the escape plan isn't reserved for billionaires. It's a blueprint for anyone who understands that the rules have already changed. The deeper we go, the clearer it becomes. Viewing Wall Street as a crime syndicate isn't outrage, it's analysis. This is why the rush toward gold and land is accelerating. It's a total rejection of digital promises made by institutions that have proven they can't be trusted. And as we continue exposing how this wealth is moved and where it's being hidden, remember this: knowledge isn't fear. It's the first step toward real security in an unstable world. Write in the comments, "This makes sense to me." Now we need to go deeper, because understanding why gold sits at the center of the billionaire escape plan requires stripping away decades of carefully constructed narrative. For years we were told that gold was outdated, a barbarous relic, something nostalgic but useless in a modern digital economy. Financial media repeated this message endlessly. The future, they said, was algorithms, speed, and screens. Physical assets were obsolete. But behind closed doors, the people with the most information, and the most to lose, were making choices that directly contradicted that story. And that contradiction is the first crack in the illusion. History makes this pattern impossible to ignore. From the collapse of the Roman Empire, to Weimar Germany, to the Great Depression, the script never changes. When corruption reaches its peak and paper promises fail, gold survives. Not because it's shiny, but because it is the only financial asset on earth that is no one else's liability. Let that sink in. Money in a bank is a promise. Stocks are promises. Bonds are promises. And promises only work as long as institutions remain solvent and credible. Gold doesn't need permission. It doesn't require trust. It exists as physical reality, atoms, not code, sovereign by nature. And this is where things get uncomfortable. Because this is exactly why central banks are doing the opposite of what they tell you to do. While the public is encouraged to trust digital systems, fiat currency, and financial intermediaries, central banks have been quietly buying gold at the fastest pace since the 1960s. Record accumulation, historic levels. Institutions with the power to create unlimited currency are aggressively trading that paper for something they cannot print. Why? Because they understand the consequences of the fire they started. After inflating the largest debt bubble in human history, they know that when confidence breaks, the only assets left standing will be the ones immune to deletion, dilution, or default. This isn't paranoia. It's risk management at the highest level. In a world where wealth exists as numbers on a screen, fragility becomes systemic. A cyber attack, a prolonged blackout, or a software failure can erase perceived wealth overnight. The ultra-wealthy are painfully aware of this. That's why gold remains the ultimate insurance. You cannot hack a gold bar. You cannot reset it. You cannot dilute it with a keystroke. While digital wealth depends on infrastructure, gold depends only on gravity and time. This signals a deeper shift in mindset. For 40 years, the elite played a growth game. Leverage, expansion, complexity. Now they're switching to survival mode. Preservation over performance. Certainty over yield. When those at the top begin hoarding gold, they are quietly admitting that the paper-based system is entering its terminal phase. They are buying fire insurance for a building they know is structurally compromised, a building they helped design. And while most people are told to stay inside that building, to keep trusting the exits marked on the walls, the people who understand power are already outside, diversifying into what history has proven to survive, choosing tangible reality over digital belief. This isn't happening in isolated vaults. It's a global repositioning that is redefining what safe actually means. In essence, the super rich are shorting the very architecture of corruption they built. By moving into gold, they reclaim economic sovereignty in a system designed to remove it from everyone else. Once you see this pattern, you can't unsee it. Every major geopolitical move, every monetary decision, every crisis response suddenly aligns. What looks like chaos starts to look like choreography, and this is only the first layer. Because while gold is the currency of the escape plan, there is something even more fundamental, something that can't be digitized, stored in a server, or replaced by code. If gold is insurance, then land is the fortress. The next move ties wealth not just to value, but to survival itself. And that's where this story gets even more unsettling. Comment below. I'm on this journey too. Now we need to go one layer deeper, because while gold protects wealth, it doesn't sustain life. And the people at the top understand this better than anyone. You can't live inside a gold bar. You can't eat it. You can't grow food on it. That realization has triggered a quiet but aggressive shift among the global elite, one that historians recognize immediately. It's the return of an old pattern under a new name, what many now call the new feudalism. If gold is how they preserve wealth, then land is how they preserve power. This isn't speculation, it's observable behavior. Over the past decade, the world's wealthiest individuals, corporations, and sovereign wealth funds have been acquiring farmland at unprecedented scale. Bill Gates is now the largest private owner of farmland in the United States. Not tech campuses, not data centers. Farmland. At the same time, massive land purchases have surged across South America, Africa, Eastern Europe, and the American Midwest. These are not random investments. They are strategic, long-term, and deeply historical. Think about who is buying this land. These are people who made their fortunes in software, finance, and digital abstraction, the very heart of the modern system. So why the sudden obsession with soil, water rights, irrigation, and crop yields? Because history teaches a brutal lesson. When financial systems fail, digital wealth evaporates, but food remains power. In every major collapse, Roman debasement, medieval breakdowns, modern hyperinflations, ownership of land determined who survived with authority and who didn't. This isn't conspiracy, it's repetition. This is where the idea of sovereignty of the stomach becomes unavoidable. Whoever controls food controls stability. Control the calories and you control behavior. By locking up fertile land, the elite aren't just hedging inflation, they're securing leverage over the most basic human need. While the average person is encouraged to store wealth inside retirement accounts, ETFs, and digital ledgers, the architects of the system are buying the physical foundations of life itself. When currency weakens, land doesn't ask permission to remain valuable. And this shift is not ideological, it's defensive. Land is uncancelable. A website can be shut down, a bank account can be frozen, a digital asset can disappear overnight. But a 1,000-acre farm with water access, food production, and energy potential is much harder to neutralize. That's why land has always been the final refuge of collapsing elites. This is not new thinking. It's ancient strategy resurfacing under modern conditions. What we are witnessing is a transition from a growth mindset to a survival mindset. For decades, wealth chased yield. Now it's chasing resilience. The question behind closed doors is no longer, how do we make more money? It's, how do we maintain control when money stops working the way it used to? And the historical answer has never changed. Control the land, and you control the future. This is why the idea of new feudalism matters. In feudal systems, power wasn't measured by numbers on paper. It was measured by how much land you owned and how many people depended on it. What looks like a land grab today is actually a reconstruction of that model. Self-sustaining estates, private food systems, independent water sources, security tied not to governments, but to geography. The elite are not escaping society. They're positioning themselves to outlast it. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition. The same people who benefit most from globalization are quietly preparing for its fragmentation. While public attention is pulled toward market noise, culture wars, and short-term volatility, long-term power is being anchored back into the ground, literally. This is the real billionaire escape plan, not rockets, not bunkers, but deeds, fences and soil that produces food. And once you see this move toward land, everything else clicks into place. Gold preserves value. Land preserves dominance. Together, they form the backbone of a strategy that assumes instability, not continuity. A strategy built on the belief that the current social contract is weakening, and that when it breaks, ownership of the physical world will matter more than anything stored in the cloud. As we move forward, the next question becomes unavoidable. How do they move and protect this wealth without triggering panic? How is this capital transferred quietly, legally, and invisibly until the shift is already complete? Because the land grab is not the end of the story. It's the destination. Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now we have to pull the curtain back completely, because this is where the story stops being uncomfortable and starts becoming dangerous. What you're about to see isn't a theory about bad decisions or failed leadership. It's something far colder, far more intentional. This is what I call the engineering of collapse. And once you understand it, you can't unsee it. This isn't about saving the system anymore. Behind closed doors, the mindset has already shifted. The goal is no longer stability, it's extraction. In the private rooms where real power operates, the question isn't, how do we fix this? It's, how much value can we remove before it breaks? What we're witnessing is not mismanagement, it's liquidation. Pause for a second and think about how a large corporation collapses. When a company is failing, insiders don't panic. They plan. Executives secure bonuses. Prime assets are moved to subsidiaries. Liabilities are left behind. Employees, pension holders, and small investors are the last to know, and the last to be paid. Now zoom out. Apply that same logic to the global economy. The super rich are treating modern civilization like a company in controlled bankruptcy. This is where the architecture of corruption turns predatory. For decades, the system has been inflated with debt, derivatives, and unlimited liquidity. A digital mirage of prosperity. The public is told to trust it, to stay invested, to keep savings inside the system. But at the same time, those who control the system are quietly converting abstract wealth into real assets. Land, gold, water, infrastructure. They are trading digits that can be erased for property that cannot. And here's the cynical brilliance of it. Losses are socialized, gains are privatized. When risk explodes, bailouts appear. When debt becomes unpayable, inflation dissolves it. When markets wobble, central banks step in. But every one of these solutions quietly transfers purchasing power away from labor and into assets already owned by the elite. Inflation becomes a hidden tax. The public becomes exit liquidity. The music keeps playing, just long enough. This is the moment most people stop listening. But this is where it gets dangerous. Because the billionaire escape plan was never about hiding from collapse. It's about owning what comes after. If digital systems fail, money disappears. Status disappears. But land doesn't. Food doesn't. Water doesn't. The person with the biggest balance loses everything. The person who controls survival resources becomes the new authority. That's not dystopian fiction. That's how every collapse in history has reorganized power. This is new feudalism in its purest form. A transition from shared, digital systems to private, physical sovereignty. From participation to dependency. From markets to control. The elite are not betting against chaos. They are positioning themselves to rule inside it. They are shorting civilization while owning the tools required to rebuild it on their own terms. And this isn't happening by accident. White-collar crime, in this context, isn't a scandal. It's a process. Inflation erodes wages. Financial engineering concentrates assets. Media distraction keeps attention away from structure and focused on noise. Every lever pulls in the same direction, toward consolidation, toward extraction, toward control. This is why the system feels like it's decaying even while markets hit records. Because it is. The numbers rise. Reality weakens. and the people who understand that gap are already gone from the paper world. Here's the brutal summary. The system isn't failing unexpectedly. It's being drained deliberately. The value is being removed quietly. And once the transfer is complete, the structure is allowed to collapse under its own weight. That's the engineering. And as we move into the final stage of this investigation, there's only one question left to ask. What kind of world is being built for those who never had an exit? Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now everything we've uncovered leads to a single, unavoidable shift, from them to you. Because this was never just a story about billionaires, gold, or land. It's a signal. And signals only matter if you know how to read them. When the people who built the system start quietly walking toward the exits, that's not coincidence. That's intelligence. It's an admission that the rules are changing. Casinos don't warn players before the odds flip, but the owners always leave first. And what we're seeing right now is exactly that kind of movement. Silent, coordinated, irreversible. Here's the key realization. The billionaire escape plan is not about money. It's about mindset. They've already accepted something most people haven't, that the era of purely digital paper-based wealth was a temporary peak, not a permanent future. So they pivoted, away from speculation, away from promises, toward things that exist whether the system works or not. That shift alone tells you more than any headline ever could. And this is where your power begins. You don't need private jets, vaults, or farmland to apply the same logic. The core principle is simple and timeless. Move away from fragility and toward resilience. Once you see how the architecture of corruption actually functions, it loses much of its power over you. You stop measuring security by numbers on a screen and start valuing things that can't be diluted. Skills, knowledge, adaptability, real-world connections, and long-term thinking. This isn't fear, it's clarity. History shows that when elites rush toward land and gold at this scale, one era is ending and another is forming. The digital promise is thinning. Physical reality is reasserting itself, and the people at the top are repositioning before the transition becomes obvious to everyone else. They're shorting the current social contract because the math no longer works, and they don't want to be holding promises when confidence breaks. So ask yourself this. If the architects of the system no longer trust it, why should you carry all the risk? This moment is about reclaiming agency, about refusing to sleepwalk through a reset you were never informed about. The music is still playing, but the tempo has changed. The seats near the exit are already taken. The only real question left is awareness, not panic, not prediction, but position. Because once you understand how power actually moves, you stop reacting and start preparing. This is the shift from dependency to discernment, from noise to pattern, from illusion to structure. And if you've stayed this far, it means you didn't just watch this investigation, you understood it. As we approach the final conclusions, remember this. Knowledge is the only asset that cannot be inflated, frozen, or erased. And choosing to see reality clearly is the first real step toward security in an unstable world. Write in the comments, I'm on this journey too. If you're still here, it means something. It means you didn't just watch a video. You followed a line of thought most people are too uncomfortable to face. That alone puts you in a different category. Everything we explored today points to one truth. Understanding how power really moves is no longer optional. And this channel exists for people who choose awareness over comfort. So instead of asking for many things, I'll ask for just one. If this perspective resonates with you, stay connected. Because what comes next builds directly on what you just uncovered. There's another piece to this puzzle waiting for you right now. Click the next video and let's go one layer deeper, together.